story from Practical Dad Advice. Malicious Compliance to Malicious Compliance. I run a repair shop where I employ a bunch of local kids, ages 16 plus, to learn skills and make some money while we generally sit around and talk about the world while we fix things. We had a client come in with a busted electronic. We fixed it up for her and gave her a decent discount on the work. Her final bill for parts and 4 hours of labor was $100 even, discounted down from $220. She didn't like the bill. She didn't like the work. She claimed that we'd broken something else. She claimed that the kid who did the work didn't know what she was doing. She did, and I had supervised her, and that the kid who helped her in the front room was rude to her. He wasn't, but she didn't like the little pride flag pin he was wearing. She demanded to see the manager. So I popped out, listened to her tear into my kids, validated how she was feeling, but pointed out that the work she had asked for was done correctly, and her bill was due on pickup of the piece. The last straw for her came when she pulled out a credit card, and I had to inform her that we don't accept that particular card. She literally asked me, "Do you know who I am?" Which I didn't, still don't care. And I told her we'd take a personal check. She wrote out a check, problem solved. I deposited the day's checks and got a note from my bank that one had bounced. Her check, of course. I called her the next day to inform her that her check had been returned for insufficient funds and that she'd need to come in and pay her bill, plus the extra fee for a returned check. All of these fees, just to point this out, were clearly outlined on the service agreement she'd signed. And we'd already discounted her $120, just to be nice. Anyway, she rolls up into the office carrying a bag, and I knew exactly what was going on. She drops, of course, a bag of pennies on the front desk. She's breathing heavily. We're on the second floor and she'd taken the stairs, and she announces triumphantly that she's here to pay her bill. She just needs to go get the rest of our hard-earned money, said with a sneer, of course. The kid at the front desk looks like he's about to cry, so I stop working on the thing I'm working on and take over. "How many more bags do you have?" I ask her, and she says that the nice people at the bank loaded them up in her car. She didn't count them. I told her that was fine. We'd wait for her to bring them all up and then settle up her bill. She was expecting a bigger reaction, I think. Either that or she hadn't thought this through. 10,000 pennies, plus the extra $25, weighs a lot. And she'd just committed to carrying them through a parking lot and up a flight of stairs. One of my kids, bless his heart, offered to help her carry them. She refused. Finally, shaking and sweaty, she deposited the last of the bags on the countertop. The pennies were loose, not in coin rolls. She'd done some work to prove her point. What she hadn't counted on was that we'd need to count the pennies. While the other kids took care of other clients and fixed things in the back, the front desk guy and I counted up the pennies. She started to realize that this was going to take a while and tried to leave. I told her that she couldn't leave until we'd signed off on her bill, since at this point she was in violation of her service agreement and had passed a bad check. We couldn't just take her word for it, and I would inform our local constabulary if she left without paying. I was kind of talking out of my ass, but she'd managed to tick me off a little. The other clients in the shop came and went, and we counted. Phone calls came in and were handled by my kids, and we counted. She sat down in a chair, folding steel, not super comfortable, stood up again, walked around the office, and we counted. After a while, she said, "Just forget it," and took out $125 in bills. We signed off on her agreement and she started to leave. Another one of my kids, bless his heart, asked her if she wanted help carrying the pennies back to her car. She looked at all of us with a face of sheer panic, mumbled, "No thank you, just keep 'em," and bolted. The whole shop was silent for a moment. Then one of the kids started giggling, and nobody could stop. People coming in thought we'd gone nuts, and I finally had to banish everybody to the back room until they could breathe again. We loaded the bags into my vehicle. We used the elevator she'd walked by a few times, took them to the bank, and used the coin machine to deposit them, then wrote out a donation to our local shelter for the amount she'd dropped off. She posted something nasty on Facebook about it and got ratios. She had, of course, posted earlier about what she was going to do, and she got called out with her own post. My favourite response was something like, "You said you were going to pay your bill in pennies. You paid your bill in pennies. What went wrong?" Please don't pay your bills in pennies, folks, especially if you're just doing it to be a dick. Office thermostat must be left at 16 degrees Celsius. This was a flawless, malicious compliance. Calm, patient, and executed to perfection. The customer wanted to be difficult, but every move backfired spectacularly. Making her suffer through the tedious penny count was brilliant, and donating the money was the ultimate cherry on top. The next story from Ziz0MBIEZ. You want me to tuck my shirt in? Sure, boss. TL/DR at bottom. Years ago, I worked at a certain big box pet store with employees in blue shirts and poorly maintained fish tanks. Back then, employees were required to tuck their uniform shirts into their khakis, with an exemption for pregnant female employees, which I was at the time of this occurrence. I worked the registers with my untucked shirt with no issues for months while I was preggo. When I was about 8 months pregnant and just a few weeks shy of going on maternity leave, we got a new manager that was painfully clueless and stupid. Isn't that always the way? So one day, this manager calls myself and the other main cashier, who was also just as preggo as I was, into the office with another manager as a witness to tell us that we are fine cashiers, but our uniforms are lacking. The other cashier and myself are just because we both had our khakis, uniform shirts, and black sneakers. Everything was neat and clean, so we both had no clue what he was talking about. I ask him what he is referring to. He replies that our shirts have to be tucked in. The other cashier and I have both been with the company for a while, and we are both super familiar with the uniform policy. So she and I both object and let him know that pregnant employees are exempt from the tucking policy. He waves his hand at us and says that we are incorrect and that all employees must tuck their shirts. The other manager that is there acting as a witness chimes in that we are correct, but clueless manager cuts witness manager off and says he knows what the policy is and that previous management was just being lax. They weren't. Pregnant employees were actually exempt. The other cashier and I shrug and leave the office to go tuck our shirts in. Clueless manager left for the day right after talking to us. Here's where the malicious compliance comes in. We tucked our shirts in for sure, but if you aren't familiar with pregnant fashion, you essentially have two options for pants. Option 1 is using a belly band on your existing pants or using pants with a belly band attached already. A belly band is essentially a very wide elastic strap that goes around the baby bump to hold your pants up, which essentially puts the top edge of your pants at your ribs. Option 2 is to do the hairband trick, which is to take an elastic hair tie and loop it through the buttonhole of your pants and around the button of the pants. This gives you a few extra inches of waist room in your pants to accommodate the baby bump, and also exposing your underwear, lower abdomen, since you cannot zip your fly. Both options look absolutely ridiculous and are meant to be concealed under a shirt, and they only get more ridiculous the more pregnant you are, which we were both heavily pregnant by this time. For those unfamiliar, by 8 months pregnant, you are basically Violet from Willy Wonka, with an internal Oompa Loompa kicking you in the bladder every 20 minutes. So we both emerge, waddle gloriously, from the back room where we tucked in our shirts looking absurd. I had my shirt tucked into my belly band just below my boobs, and the other cashier had hers tucked into her hairband closed pants, below her belly, and with her leopard print underwear exposed. Clueless manager was already gone for the day, so he was not present to see our magnificent uniform compliance. He wasn't in for another 2 days, so he didn't see our dutiful compliance, but all of our customers and co-workers sure did. Our regulars asked why we had our shirts tucked like that, and of course we obliged them and explained that clueless manager insisted we tuck our shirts in to comply with the uniform policy. For 2 full days, and part of that first shift after clueless manager left for the day, customer complaints to corporate about our treatment rolled in, and co-workers called the employee hotline to report clueless manager. District manager is pissed about the whole thing, which we found out on day 3. On day 3, return of clueless manager, he enters the store, sees the other cashier and myself with our beautifully ridiculous uniforms and asks why we are dressed like that. Jotsu, you told us to tuck our shirts in. He gets red in the face and beelines to the office. He calls us into the office immediately and starts going off on us for not taking the uniform policy seriously. Mid-tirade, the district manager arrives, furious. She turned to us pregos egos and nicely told us to untuck our shirts and head back out to the floor before turning to clueless manager and going ballistic on him for enforcing something that we pregos were exempt from. Turns out clueless manager ruined district manager's days off because of all the complaints that came in about the 2 pregnant employees forced by a male manager to show their underwear pregnancy attire in public due to an absurd uniform policy. The complaints weren't just about the manager. They were about the company uniform policy as well. The customers didn't know the real policy. And the employee hotline complaints as well. All of these had to be handled by the district manager ASAP because the sheer number of complaints in such a short time meant that the regional manager was breathing down the district manager's neck to resolve the issue. District manager forced an apology to us out of clueless manager and treated us to lunch. We also got our stools to sit on at the register's back. Clueless manager took our stools away because if you can lean, you can clean. Clueless manager was sent to back HR training and fired shortly after for another similar violation. I was on maternity leave, so I didn't get to wish him farewell. TLDR. Clueless manager forces heavily pregnant employees to dress ridiculously. Many customer and employee complaints ensue. Edit for the morbidly curious about that similar violation I mentioned. Clueless manager refused to special order a pin-back name tag for an employee with a pacemaker. Our name tags were magnetic, because young people don't have pacemakers. Clueless manager also refused to let this employee at least move the magnetic tag to the opposite side of his chest, to at least not have the magnet sitting directly over his pacemaker, because this was not in compliance with the uniform policy. This guy was actually insinuating that this employee was just looking to make trouble and get special treatment over a name tag. This was textbook malicious compliance, flawless execution with maximum impact. The absurdly tucked-in shirts humiliated the clueless manager while exposing his incompetence to customers and corporate. The backlash was swift, justice was served, and the revenge was both hilarious and satisfying. The next story from Bloopyhead. TL. DR. After we started work on a contract for an urgent and very delivery date sensitive project, a procurement exec fooled us into getting started before contract signature and then used all sorts of excuses and played dumb as much as realistically possible to delay execution of the contract in order to irritate us and get us to abandon our principles out of sheer frustration. When we realized these tactics, we used the same tactics and turned them against him. We won. I wish I had a juicier outcome than just, we won. But I got a pretty good business and life lesson out of it. 15 years ago, my company developed a unique software for a big company. It's basically a software that manages the workforce. For that initial work years ago, they didn't want to pay the whole upfront cost to write the software, so they agreed to a reduced price, but with a never-ending annual license, which included support and maintenance. The product had been stable, so we mostly collected the annual license fee and did some basic support here and there, and added incremental features for a fee, so we recouped our fees and got a better long-term outcome this way. A couple of years ago, they changed their procurement and payment systems, and we had several invoices go unpaid. Some ended up being 36 months late. Not because of any technical reasons, but because of ineptitude. The monthly email reminders were ignored, and because the threads that lasted from 1 month to the next and from manager to manager were just insane with hundreds of replies and up to 50 people CC'd at one point, going over the same topics over and over again constantly, with them asking for proof of the work performed, for proof of the work request, proof of managerial approval for the work request, for copies of the invoices that we sent that were already there 4 times an email thread, and so on. Right when we thought we would wrap up the thread, someone would say, "Wait, what are we talking about again?" And the whole thread would just go for another iteration of the craziness. It was a total nightmare, enough to make anyone lose their marbles. We eventually got paid. But goddamn, about 5 years ago, they called us up and said, "We're bringing in new back-end systems at our production facility, so you have to do a major update to your software so that it can talk to our new systems. The new systems will be online January 1st, so it's critical that no matter what your system must be ready by then." So we quickly agree on a price for the updates. We're told the contract will follow the following week. They assign a project manager, / coordinator, and we start working right away because we need every minute if we're to make that deadline. Except the contract doesn't come. Instead, we're put in touch with the procurement guy to finalize the details. Let's call this guy Ashish. Ashish was also on the previous email threads and not exactly on the ball then. A warning sign. Time. Tick-tock. First, Ashish proceeds to ask me for a copy of the old master contract. Then he tell me that he doesn't understand it and that we'll need a new master contract in the future. Then he says he doesn't understand what the software does and as far as he's concerned, it's just a nice to have for the company. Then he says it should be free of charge, since it's included in the maintenance and support, but no, the changes they want are 10 plus years out and out of scope from the original requirements. Of course, we're polite as we answer, but there's something about the way he writes and asks for stuff that makes us believe he's either just dumb or severely overloaded and or out of touch, and or our small contract is just a pebble in his shoe and just loses focus. But still, he nitpicks about details of the agreement, about things that make no sense and that clearly shows he's totally unaware of the context. Since he's my single point of contact to get the paperwork done, I'm starting to lose patience. Time. Tick-tock. We exchange several drafts, all of which contain more of his impossibly stupid requests and details that are completely unrelated to the task at hand. I mean, who the hell is this guy? I waste a ton of hours, days actually, explaining what the project is about, why XYZ is necessary, and why ABC clause doesn't apply. Once we eventually agree on a final, good enough draft ready for me to sign, it doesn't come. Time. Tick-tock. He calls me one day and says he wants to redo the whole thing because he thinks it's not properly framed and wants me to make him an entirely new proposal, and we have to get a new master agreement anyway. Me make a new proposal? For what? We had just agreed to the price and wording for what the new update does. He then proceeds to tell me that as far as he's concerned, it should even be free, so the new contract should take that into account. I explained to him that it's definitely not a nice to have, and that it won't be free, and that if we don't get this done, production will grind to a halt due to the particular problem that our software solves. So I refuse, telling him we're already well underway with the work. He says fine and says that he'll send the last draft ASAP. Time. Tick-tock. A few more weeks go by, and almost every day I email to get status. Nothing. I eventually get a note from him asking if my new proposal is ready for him to review. Oh, FFS. I get on the phone with him. We start afresh with a new round of him not understanding anything about the work and the contract, him discussing issues that are irrelevant, wanting guarantees that make no sense, and a nonsensical wording of the work involved. Oh, and BTW, he now wants to know our cost basis for doing the work because it's too expensive, and we'll have to review the price down. Yet again, during all this time, he seems genuinely confused or unaware of context or the pressures the company is under with this. And more, I'm flabbergasted as to why this is the guy in charge of negotiating our contract. As much as I explain again and again, nothing seems to register, or if it does, we're back to square one the following day. I'm going completely insane dealing with this. One day, over beer, I explain the situation to one of my buddies and he laughs. Damn, this guy is really having fun. Acting dumb like this is one of the many tactics that procurement people will use to erode all of your patience in the hope that you'll eventually just throw up your hands up in the air and say, fine, and sign whatever. either just out of sheer frustration or because the alternative is just no contract, no payment for all of the work you've already put in. Trust me, this guy knows what he's doing. The proper counter-response to this? Just play dumb too. But he knows you by now, so pretending to be dumb will be seen as acting in bad faith. So simply withdraw from the negotiations and put him in front of a totally new guy. And have that new guy be as clueless as possible and have as little authority as possible in the negotiations, unable to approve any decision, and make him get back to him with unrelated questions and just enough nonsense. Next, tell the procurement guy you're going on vacation and that your team has stopped the work until a contract is signed. Maybe he's really dumb, but I doubt it. I think he'll wise up real fast. Brilliant. I get back home from the pub and I check Ashish's LinkedIn profile. Senior VP Procurement. Education, Harvard Business School. Right, this guy's not an idiot. He was fucking with me the whole time. Next morning, I talk to my management team and explain the situation. They all get a laugh and are willing to participate in the theatrics. I write Ashish an email saying that I am putting him in touch with Arnold, CC'd, that I was taking vacation and an extra 3-month sabbatical, and that we will resume the work once the agreement is signed. It worked perfectly. The ignorance my coworker played was brilliant, completely believable. Ashish became increasingly restless in his emails, and suddenly transformed from being the clueless guy to the sharp exec he actually was, as he realized he might be the cause for the project to fail and to not be delivered in time. In the end, we signed the document a few weeks after Arnold took over. We didn't give an inch. We delivered on time. The lower managers at Big Company were relieved. They too were completely flabbergasted with the stupid email chains, but they were powerless to intervene. The revenge was flawless, and it was executed perfectly. By flipping the script and making Ashish taste his own medicine, the OP turned a frustrating situation into a masterclass in negotiation. The plan was executed brilliantly, exposing Ashish's tactics and forcing him to concede completely. Very interesting Reddit story from serious-_face. Putting a smile from A to Z. Gear yourself up, as this is a long one. All your punctuation and spelling experts take their day off, as this is a story about a delivery driver, myself, not a job that requires an ology in the mechanics of the English language. At the start of COVID in UK, where all good stories start, I had myself an easy job working in a casino. Once lockdown started, we were all put on furlough for 6 months. I finally had all that free time that I said I had needed to do all the things I have never had the time to do. Like many people, having time is not the same as having motivation. And all I did in that 6 months was become very good at Call of Duty, drinking beer, and putting on weight. After the first lockdown was lifted, we returned to work with many changes, and most of them just made the job a drudge, and I started to hate it. When we were told that we would be going into lockdown again, I had to make a choice for my own sanity and my waistline, that I would leave this job and do something so I could be working. Sounds crazy now that I would choose work over free money for doing nothing, but that is what I did. There is also a story in this, but that's for another Reddit. The new job. I looked on Facebook, it was lockdown, and it was easy. See above, lacks motivation. I found recurring adverts for work with one of the world's largest online shops. We will call them amazing, not amazing. And this was in the last mile part of the service as a delivery associate, delivery driver. The money was good, and you would be driving a branded van, all fuel paid, easy job on the face of it. In September, I contact them and get called in to do a tux test. While I'm here, I get the info on the situation. I'm not actually working for Amazing, not amazing, but I'm working for a delivery service partner, DSP. In fact, I'm not really working for them, as I'm a self-employed contractor. In essence, I was to be paid £100 a day, and if we got good delivery numbers for a week, we would get a bonus at one of 3 levels on all the days I worked. It's a standard thing with Amazing and the branded vans. Having heard some horror stories of how the non-branded drivers are treated and fleeced by the DSP that they work for, Amazing, not amazing, knows what's going on and don't care. This seemed a good deal. No in-van training was given due to COVID, but I've driven big vans and trucks and all sorts, so not a problem for me. Scary to think though, they give no training and let people loose on the roads in these vans, and it's not changed much without the COVID restrictions. Amazing, not amazing, seem to not worry about this. The work takes a bit of getting used to, and it's hard work to start with and in all weather conditions. The routes are all pre-caged, so you collect your parcels and you get a device that tells you where to go. Route times are 8 hours, and the little amazing computer programs the route. You have 1 hour extra for retries. When you first start out, even after 9 hours, you'll have been behind, and some poor soul who finished their route early will come and rescue you. More on this later. If you go over the 9-hour mark, your DSP gets a fine from amazing, not amazing. By the time December rolls around, the DSP that I'm working for has taken on loads of extra drivers and more branded vans, even taken on 20 non-branded vans with promises from amazing for continued work over the festive season and into the next year. Not even half the non-branded vans got used. I've become very efficient at looking at my route in the morning and changing it around. My 8-hour route can be completed in 4 to 5 hours, and in December we started work at 6 a.m, so I was the one doing the rescues. Or if everyone was up to date, I would be home by midday. It was really that easy, although them bonuses never seemed to kick in. Amazing, not amazing, never had a problem with it. And I was working weekends when they had a real problem getting people to work them days, and to many people dropping shifts. Roll into January, and suddenly amazing, not amazing, tells my DSP, we can't give you all that work we promised, so you are going to have to let a load of your drivers go. End of January, I get home and my partner throws a pregnancy test at me and said, I'm not getting fat, I'm pregnant. Then bursts into tears. Turns out she was 5 months pregnant, neither of us are young, and she just thought it was menopause. Not the ideal time with work laying off drivers, but I had laid good groundwork to being a good driver, never sick, always working weekends and helping out when needed, even picking up dropped shifts. I had to drop a shift a week so the DSP could keep as many drivers as possible, just in case amazing, not amazing, actually gave them more work. I was fine with that, and the 4-day week means more time with the baby mama, watching her belly grow with the baby due in May. By the end of April, I'm doing 5-day weeks again. And now COVID restrictions are loosening up a bit more, and the DSP I work for are trading new drivers and getting them to go out a couple of times with experienced drivers to show them the ropes, and I get to be doing that a lot. It's a great skive as it's half routes, and even with someone that's slow, it's 4 hours max. I tell them I'm going to be off for a bit from mid-May, and I'll let them know when I'm coming back. I don't get holiday pay or paternity leave, but my bank balance is okay, and damn, I'm about to be a dad. I take off till early July. It's great being home with the baby and her mum. She is awesome. Her mum is awesome and life is good. But I've made the decision that I need to be doing something else, as this job has very limited prospects. I start on a course that'll take about a year, and I can do it around working for amazing, not amazing. I go back to work, and it kind of runs the same as the year before, but I get to train new drivers. And again, as Christmas comes, the DSP takes on loads of new drivers and a load more vans. As amazing, not amazing, has promised them more work even after the Christmas peak. I shit you not, they hired 10 non-branded vans and I only ever saw 2 go out on routes. I say nothing and just crack on head down, only working 4 days, 2 of which are weekends, as I need to study and help out with the baby. Come January and all that work, amazing, not amazing, had promised the DSP was no place to be seen, and it was time to get rid of excess drivers. Again, I'm in a good position as I complete my routes and help when needed. Also work Saturday and Sunday. I need a minimum of 4 days a week to cover my lavish lifestyle, pay my bills, support my family. Already spoke with the boss and told him this, and was assured that because of my rank, top 5 driver, it was of little importance to me until this. In the DSP, I'd be fine. Here comes the malicious compliance. Sorry it took so long. Come February, I check the rota, and I've only got 3 days while other people get 5 days. And they don't do weekends yet, I do. Not one to be messed around. I contact the boss and explain my frustration at my lack of work and tell them that going forward, I won't be working weekends unless I get 4 shifts. The following week, we are told that if you want more than 3 shifts a week, you need to work at least 1 weekend shift. Following week, I'm on 3 shifts again, and including Sunday and Saturday, the week runs Sunday to Saturday, I go in on Sunday, speak to the boss, and he says nothing he can do about it now. I tell him, you best get someone to cover that Saturday then, as I won't be doing it. Come Saturday, my phone gets lit up, and I just ignore it. I put in my request for the next week, Monday to Wednesday, no weekends, and 3 days only. Had a nice late sleep on Sunday, removed my DSP boss's number from my favorites so it couldn't get past my silent mode on my phone. And sure enough, I had about 10 missed calls and a few messages asking me to cover dropped routes. On Monday, I was back in, did my route. Took about 5 hours, and the rest of the week went like that. Come the weekend, I'd get missed calls and messages as they were desperate for weekend drivers. Not much they could do as I was only doing 3 days a week now and not working weekends. Come March and all of a sudden, amazing, not amazing. Tell the DSP that your drivers are finishing their routes too quick. Tell them to slow down. I get told this and I'm like, hold on, we get paid the same money to do the same job, but you want us to do it slower. By this time, I've had enough and I'm ready to quit anyway. And I've got myself something else lined up that I'd been working on, so I went out on that day and bashed my route out in just over 3.5 hours. Admittedly, my boss was not happy, but I no longer had any respect for him, so it didn't bother me. Next day, I'm 30 drops ahead and get the message that I need to slow down or I won't be on the rota next week, so I Zoom call my dad and we chat for an hour. I actually take a lunch break, the first one I'd ever had as a delivery driver, managed to push it to 7 hours, and still, I got berated in the team WhatsApp group. So I thought, sod this. I came in the next day with some textbooks and put my device in airplane mode. When I got 30 ahead, I stopped, did some reading, got myself 30 behind chilled, even had a nap one time after the baby had a bad night. I did this for a few weeks. My days were longer, but I was getting my study done and my course was nearly done. I had set up an interview with a company that would give me a job, and obviously I did it over a Zoom call from the back of my delivery van. I overrun on my route that day by 15 minutes, which is a big no, but hey, I got the job, so wasn't too bothered. I needed to continue working for 4 more weeks, but I was going to do it at a snail pace, a snail with a limp. I maxed out my drive time every day. They stopped sending people to rescue me as I'd just slow down even more. I went from top rank to lowest and still no sign caring about it. I jacked it in a week early as I no longer had the will or the need to do it. I will say this about that job. I met some great people and made some good friends. I experienced people from other countries and cultures, and we had a laugh when it was good. But the staff turnover is unbelievable, and how that company treats people like expendable objects has really darkened my view of them. Now, I'm sorry if I bored you with this, but it amused me at the time, and I thought I'd share. The malicious compliance was perfectly executed, and it was strategic, calculated, and satisfying. By slowing down and embracing the inefficiency, OP made a clear point without sacrificing personal goals. The next story from XX Loose Way. Next. New purse check rule, absolutely mandatory. I work 3 jobs. The hours and days vary. My full-time job is in an office space on a very fancy modern officer with a great company. They have some great amenities on site too, a full gym, lockers and showers, full cafeteria, etc. My second job is close to full-time, FT, depending on other employees' availability, no set schedule, very chaotic and not well ran. It's a boutique just a bus ride from my office, and it's all in a very busy downtown tourist port city by the ocean. The thing is, it's a tourist boutique. It's all city-branded trinkets, shirts, postcards and gifts. There's really not much any locals would want unless buying it for out-of-town family. Third job is a fast food place. I'm often between these two jobs and don't have time to run home between. I carry a gym bag with me, with my tiny purse, wallet inside, along with clean business professional clothes, gym clothes, and work uniforms to change in and out of. Extra underwear, it's summer and extremely hot, and our buses don't usually ever have AC, so if there's time, I'll shower at the office and I have travel-sized shower items. A book for the bus rides, I don't have a car, lunch and snacks, hairbrush. Apparently, the boutique has experienced a lot of loss, something we had previously brought up being an issue because our boss, the owner, will have big tables and buckets of items outside by the sides of the door where we can't monitor them, especially if we're inside with customers. People definitely take advantage, and we've seen a lot of people grab things and just talk off. These aren't the cheaper items in the store either. We've lost an entire display of mid-priced sunglasses, handfuls of bikini separates, and at one point, the entire table was emptied in a snatch and run with about 5 younger people. But he thinks it's us stealing things. His wife runs the store, she's always in. She said we have a new mandatory bag check, and every employee in the store is a woman who usually carries a purse or bag. It's not just a quick look through the bag. She wants to remove the items and feel around the sides of the bag and make sure we aren't taking any trinkets and items. I'll be honest, I haven't seen anybody on staff, there's 4 of us, ever steal anything. And I don't even think it's because they're all stand-up employees. I think it's because they don't care to own any of the cheap tacky tourist items. Because my bag is bigger, it's been kind of a nightmare for me. She wants me to take every individual item out of my bag and show there's nothing wrapped up inside of it, lay it out across a table by the register. The first day of this, I was late to work because she wouldn't start checking my bag until I clocked out, and then she took her time with a customer, causing me to be almost a half hour late to my other job. I considered that I could just continue getting lockers at my office, but they're day use only. So depending on my schedule, I'd have to make a separate trip to get back to the office before the building closed to remove my items, and it wouldn't be feasible with my other jobs. I'm honestly pretty sure the staff who cleans the lockers at the end of the day probably wouldn't mind and would work something out for me, but I don't feel like I need to go out of my way to keep a steady rotation on a locker. If my boutique manager wants to make things awkward and difficult on me, I'm going to turn around and do it right back to her. She is a very tightly wound conservative lady, so I added a few extra items to my gym bag. I don't get my period, but I picked up a menstrual cup. Period talk makes her absolutely faint. I included some new reading material, old 70s Playboys I keep at the house for aesthetic purposes, and I just like them. I swapped in some of my sexiest and functionally impossible underwear, but also one of my grainiest of panties. I also, for no reason at all, included condoms, furry handcuffs, a gag gift at my sister's bachelorette party, and I picked up a pamphlet at a nearby community centre for their group therapy for bereavement. It went off perfectly at the end of my shift. There were customers in the store, and she made me go through my bag item by item, opening them up and holding it up so she could check to make sure there was nothing hidden. I carefully fanned out my old magazines to show there was nothing between the pages. I pulled out each set of panties like a creepy fashion show, holding them up to the light so she could see directly through the lace. Every item we pulled out of the gym bag made her more and more flush. She was uncomfortable. She could barely perform the check. She nearly had a panic attack when I pulled out a little sandwich baggie with a menstrual cup in it. I even pulled out the pamphlet and set it aside slowly with intent to seem affected by it, and she looked at me quizzically and kind of confused, asked what this is about, and I said solemnly, "Oh, I haven't lost anybody, but it's a great place to meet new people." I pulled the condoms out right after saying that. My second back check was definitely faster than the first, and I was finished and out the door in time to catch my bus and arrive to work early actually. Speed running the bag check wasn't my initial plan, but it was definitely an unconsidered plus to the situation. I honestly don't mind doing a back check if they really feel like it's so necessary, but the invasiveness of making every employee pull out inside everything in their bags on a table where every customer in the store has a plain view of everything they have is a little much, and purposely making it take so much time that it's interfering with our other jobs and personal lives is crossing the line. But now, I'm kind of excited to see what other items I can include in my gym bag just to keep her on her toes. I don't want it to be too obvious, but just enough to make her consider that a lady's bag is usually private, and upending that for all our customers to see might not be great for business. Edit. Thank you all for the information about bag checks having to be performed before clocking out. I definitely did not know that and will be bringing it up with my coworkers and the manager. Update. Bag checks are officially cancelled. Day 2, the rest of the employees and I gave the manager the information about back checks needing to be completed on paid time. She absolutely did not appreciate having to stick to our personal time schedules to complete the task. By day 4, all my co-workers and I had brought in so many personal and uncomfortable items that she was no longer felt it necessary to check. Thank you all for the suggestions. The malicious compliance was absolutely flawless, strategic, hilarious, and effective. By weaponizing discomfort, the employees turned an invasive policy into an unbearable ordeal for management. It wasn't just petty revenge. It was a masterclass in reclaiming dignity while forcing real change. The next story from iStabs. I want to be notified about every single critical issue. And then he greatly regretted it. Years ago, I ran the daily operations of a mid-size IT company. Large enterprise, government, medical, and other facilities would outsource their IT to the team I ran. We had departments that supported us with finance and sales, but all other operations fell under my management. I answered to the owner of the company, who was great when we started off together, but over time grew very resentful and abusive. Long ago, he worked in IT, but nowadays his skills were outdated and his knowledge was on par with a Tier 1 technician. But if he actually tried to do the job, then the actual Tier 1s would have easily outperformed him. I oversaw a few dozen technicians, and we managed IT for thousands of companies, with each technician closing approximately 150 tickets a day, empowered by automation and their own knowledge. Since these companies and government entities were responsible for things like actual 911 services, running prisons, doing dangerous pressure testing in environments with explosion risks, and more, you can imagine we were routinely receiving tickets that were urgent. In fact, we had a system clearly defined that dictated exactly what criteria constituted emergency versus urgency. Even with all that in place, half our tickets would meet the criteria of being an emergency. Things as simple as a camera not working could mean not seeing criminals waiting on the other side of a door, for example. My team lived every day fully immersed in emergency to the point where we were all dead inside. We would rise to the responsibility and treat it appropriately, but when everything is an emergency, nothing is an emergency. We regularly heard compliments about how cool-headed and calm we were able to respond to emergencies, which was always funny to us because internally we knew it was because we stopped giving a fuck years ago, but still knew how to be professional. Over time, feedback from co-workers regarding things said behind my back and to my face, I can only assume the owner felt threatened by me and the way the team looked to me to lead. He would give them bad instructions or orders they knew would go against something standard, and they would look to me to confirm. He accused me of a lot of horrible things, got really abusive, and would routinely try to tear me down in front of everyone. I essentially lived on call 24/7 and would rely on technicians being skilled enough to not escalate to me after hours. But it was unavoidable. When they knew a choice had to be made and not just a solution provided, they would always call to ask which I preferred. No big deal. It helped me keep clients happy by choosing options I knew they would want from my experience with their managers. Sometimes I would be unavailable when they would try to call, and as an alternative, if they could not reach a senior engineer on our team, they would finally surrender and call the owner. They didn't want to be responsible for bad decisions, and I don't blame them. Calling the owner gave them some CYA, cover your ass. Every time this would happen, the owner would always drastically exaggerate the urgency of the situation and treat it like it was the biggest case we had in months. It was always all hands on deck needed to support him in this crisis that he was creating, and so more technicians would get involved and drastically more hours invested than necessary. Then he would inevitably pat himself on the back for how great he is in solving this massive emergency. Use it to highlight why he is around and how the big problems go to him. Then circle back to rip me apart in front of everyone once we are all back in the office to show how I'm not managing my responsibilities and how much better he is than myself. To quote an old line from a shitty movie, to him it was the biggest emergency in months. But to me, it was Tuesday. Anyways, not to get too boring and rant too much, he ripped me in front of everyone. Took me behind closed doors to yell at me how this one particular emergency could have cost us so much money. Cost us the customer. And it's my entire fault. I'm tired of his so I tell him how it could have been resolved compared to how he resolved it, and that he is so unaware of daily operations, he has no idea how insignificant this issue was by comparison. He assures me he is aware of every detail going on in this company at all times. He's not, and that if emergencies are happening, then he needs to be notified of them. I tell him he's underestimating how many emergencies happen, and he's fuming that I'm not taking his. He makes a mistake and demands yelling, "From now on, I want to be notified about every single critical issue." I ask him if he's fine with me notifying him by email. He screams back, "Do whatever the you want. I want to be notified about every single critical issue from now on." So I promise him I will absolutely notify him and keep him informed of everything from here forward. He's the boss. For anyone not aware, a common form of malicious compliance in the IT world is for someone to invest a very small amount of effort into scripting or automating something that causes another person's life to be a living nightmare. The boss is old and operates slowly through his day using email. He never goes into the ticket system and doesn't abide by any of the policies he screams at people for not following. In our ticket system, the tickets assigned to him are like entering a graveyard of endless promises that never happen, and constant lies about not seeing that email. It takes me all of 2 minutes to set up a rule that our system automatically sends him an email absolutely any time a ticket is marked critical. Even if it's done incorrectly and someone more senior corrects it back to a lower status, too late, email is already sent. Immediately he gets hundreds of emails for his own existing tickets, then thousands more follow for all the other tickets. His inbox is so out of control that his lies about not seeing that email are suddenly made real. Making the situation even funnier, he was meeting with a client at their office when the tones on his phone started going off every time he received an email. He started texting me not even a half hour after the automated rules creation, asking me to turn it off, explaining how it's impacting his meeting. I ignored his texts and let the rule run long enough that I was sure his inbox was royally fucked, and he would have to ask me in person to turn it off. Instead of apologizing, he told me to turn the notifications off in person, but also made it clear that I needed to get to work to get things under control. Clearly, it was my bad leadership causing there to even be so many emergencies in the first place. If these are all an emergency, then why are technicians going home at the end of the day, and so on? A few weeks after this, I had a new job offer that I accepted. I didn't even give him notice when I quit. I walked in on Monday morning and grabbed 2 things off my desk, went find him, and handed him the keys to the building and looked him in the eyes and told him, "You know, you're a real piece of shit." He was fuming, but didn't say a word as I walked out the door. Within a year of me leaving his company, quickly began to fail. Last I saw, he only has 3 people working for him now, and he had to sell the building they owned and move into a much older, shabbier one in a different part of town. The malicious compliance was flawless, swift, and devastating. By automating the chaos, he claimed to control, and the boss was buried in his own arrogance. It was the perfect mix of justice and irony, proving his incompetence while making his life miserable. The next story from BBQ Lunch. Can't you just unload around me? So this happened earlier today and was too perfect to not share with you guys. I work in construction as the foreman for a new house build. The location is kinda strange. The house is 250 feet up a hill via a footpath only. All of our materials have to come up this footpath by hand. It's a pain in the ass to manually carry, quite literally, an entire house up this hill. One of our saving graces is having the 2 parking spots on the street at the bottom of this hill marked with official no parking signs. Unfortunately, there is an elementary school about half a block away, and the parents of children seem to regularly, at least twice a day, think it's okay to park in our spots. Now, I consider myself a reasonable person, so if someone is parked in the spots and we don't have a delivery or a need to park a truck, I will let it go. If we need the spots and there's someone parked there, however, I will ask them to move nicely, and most of the time they do so immediately. Until today. I get a phone call from the lumber delivery truck that is en route to our location. He says he'll be there in about 2 or 3 minutes. I let him know I will meet him at the street and make sure he has space to park. He's carrying all of the material to frame the roof of our house, which is a lot of really big lumber, and will take easily an hour to bring up the hill. So naturally, I didn't want him parked in the middle of the street with his hazards on for an hour, when we have a perfectly good parking spot for him. As I begin my trip down the hill, I notice there is a school parent sitting in her car idling, assuming she's just waiting to pick up her child. I walk up to her car and politely let her know that she is parked in a no parking zone and we really need her to clear it to park a delivery truck. She scoffs at me and rudely states back, "I'll just be a few minutes, and your truck isn't here? Take a chill pill, dude." Before I can respond, a giant lumber truck comes around the corner, and I wave to him, and then gesture towards him to the woman in the car who has now put her window back up to ignore me. I put on my best customer service smile and wave at her through the window. She put it down halfway and angrily shouts, "What?" By now, the truck has pulled up alongside her car, and I politely ask her again, with a stronger tone of voice to move her vehicle, reminding her that she is illegally parked in a tow-away zone. Then she gives me this wonderful idea. She says, "Can't you guys just unload around me? Jesus, it's not that hard." I give her another smile and walk away, a brilliant plan forming in my head. I instruct the delivery driver to park as closely to her as possible and block her in with the portal potty that is at one end of our reserved spots and the parked car that is parked just adjacent to our spots on the other end. He smiles because he immediately gets what I'm trying to do and proceeds to expertly block this lady and her car into a little 2 parking spot jail. We unstrapped the lumber and my guys begin humping material up the hill. Meanwhile, I call the police parking enforcement to let them know the situation. At this point in time, I wasn't trying to get her in trouble. I just wanted a record of why we were blocking part of the street so we don't get in trouble with the city. The very friendly traffic officer lets me know that she can be there in about 30 minutes and deal with the situation for me. Wonderful. As we continue to unload lumber, the child of the parent shows up, and wouldn't you know it? Mom is just now realizing that the lumber truck is parked so close she can't get out of her driver door to meet her kid. She awkwardly clambers across the inside of her car and stumbles out the passenger door, shooting glaring looks at me and the truck driver in the process. She loads her kid into the back and then begins to realize that she has no way of leaving. She comes storming up to myself and the driver and states, "I'm in a big hurry. You need to move your damn truck right now so I can go." Before I can respond, the driver gets a grin on his face and says, "Ma'am, in order to unload the lumber on the truck, we had to unstrap it, and per our company policy, I'm not allowed to move the truck with any unsecured load on it. Sorry." This sends her into near aneurysm levels of blood pressure. Meanwhile, I can barely contain my laughter. "Your policy, I have somewhere to be," she barks back at him. At this point, with impeccably convenient timing, the parking enforcement officer shows up and parks behind the truck. She doesn't see the officer arrive, and while the officer is still getting out of her vehicle, I just casually say, "Can't you just pull out around it? It's not that hard." With the biggest shit-eating grin I've ever had, I watch as she realizes that I just used her line on her. "F you," she yells and storms back to her car and angrily clamber back in through the passenger door and into the driver's seat. At this point, the officer is walking up to myself and the driver before she can even introduce herself. The mom in the car slams it into reverse and stomps on the gas, crashing into our portal potty and knocking it over, and then throws the car into drive and tries to mount the curb and drive on the sidewalk. The officer, driver, and I are staring in disbelief as she gets halfway over the curb and gets stuck. I can hear her screaming obscenities over the idling truck from inside her car. The officer promptly walks up to the door of the car and orders her out. My favourite part of the entire thing is watching her face go to shock as she realised she just did all of that in front of a police officer. She gets slapped in cuffs as the parking officer calls for a second unit, and she is promptly sat on the very curb she tried to drive over. She sits on the curb yelling to the now two officers about how we told her she could stay there and that we never asked her to move. The traffic officer responds that she was the one who was originally called when she first refused to move and that she already knows what's going on. While myself and the driver are giving a report to the second officer, my guys finish moving the remainder of the lumber, and the driver finishes his statement and takes off to go back to the yard. By the end of the ordeal, she was arrested, charged with child endangerment. Her kid was in the back of the car the whole time. Reckless driving, destruction of property, the porta potty, and driving on a suspended license. On top of all that, she also got her car towed, the kid went home with his grandma, and she went to spend some quality time in a cell. I never expected her to actually heed my advice to just pull out around it. But I think next time she'll probably think twice about parking in a tow-away zone if she ever gets a license again. TLDR. Rude lady parks in construction site reserved parking. Asks us to unload around her, so we park blocking her to do so. Gets mad when she now has no way out. Crashes into our porta potty and tries to mount the sidewalk. Gets stuck and the arrested by an officer who was on scene, and all with her child in the back seat. Edit. Some people have been asking for pictures of the site. The malicious compliance was flawless, strategic, ironic, and perfectly executed. Blocking her and using her own logic was genius, and her meltdown made it even sweeter. The officer arriving at the perfect moment was just the cherry on top. Absolute perfection. The next story from Jupacabra: denied a raise and moved to overnight position and told, "Don't care how you do your job, just do it." Okay, I will. I used to work in hotels in a ski town in Colorado. Very expensive, but the quality of life. Very common saying there. I had started at a new hotel and was making $10 an hour living with my brother in a 2-bedroom place that was 700 square feet. Rent was half our income. When the slow season approached, I was told I would have to move to night audit, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., or risk being let go. The problem was, I lived 3 miles from the hotel and took the bus to get there, since I couldn't afford a car. The bus did not run at night or early morning, so I would be walking 6 miles a day in several inches to a foot or more in snow. So I asked for a raise. They said they'd get back to me, but need an answer, and I need the job. So okay, I'll work night audit. I start the next week as an auditor, and while I'm being trained, I learn that I'm also losing a day. The other auditor works 3 days, and I'll be working 4 days, not 5. That's $320 a month hit to my income before taxes. So I'll need to be making $12.50 an hour to keep making the same thing with the cut hours. But I decide I'm going to ask for $14. I complete training and meet with my GM. He asks how I like it, and I start off with my concerns. I tell him I wasn't told I'd lose a day, and with having to walk 6 miles a day in the snow, I was going to need a raise to $14 an hour. He let out an audible sigh and tells me he can easily hire someone for this position for $10 an hour, and to take it or leave it. I knew it would be very hard to find a job in the winter when everything closes up, so I stayed. As I walked out of his office, he says, "I don't care how you do your job, just do it." Okay, I will. You see, this job was easy. It was 7 hours of me doing absolutely nothing and 1 hour of actual work, which gave me plenty of time to find shortcuts. The software we used allowed us to import scripts that you downloaded from the developer's site. One such script was a way to make my job literally one click. The problem was, it was $500 a year license for it. Obviously, I wouldn't propose to my GM a way to eliminate my job, but there was a free trial on every script for 7 days. I remember at the time you get around paywalls on news websites by going into the web console and simply removing the paywall from the source code. I decided to see if this was something I could do with this script. And what do you know? I downloaded it and opened the script in a text editor, and the only thing making this script a trial was a line that said, licensee, and had the date set 7 days out from when I downloaded it. I changed the computer's date to 8 days from now, and tried to run the script in our software, and got a notification that said the free trial had ended. So I changed it back and set the expiration date to 2050. This took my manual job of 1 hour and made it 3 to 5 minutes. All I had to do was specify a date range, and it check off what reports I wanted done and printed, and click start. That was it. I always manually reviewed everything just in case. But that wasn't it. We had a kitchen where we made breakfast and dinner for the guests. Evening shift got free dinner, and morning shift got free breakfast. I didn't get anything. They eventually decided to have the auditors set up breakfast so the kitchen crew didn't have to come in as early. I asked if we got free breakfast and was told no, despite setting up everything to make their jobs easier. I should also note that we had to clean any dishes left from dinner that the kitchen didn't get to, despite not even getting any dinner. But I had the kitchen all to myself for 6 hours. So I started making myself dinner around 1 a.m., whatever I wanted. The only limits were the ingredients in the kitchen, and since I was responsible for dishes from other shifts, I never left any evidence behind. I no longer had to buy food to bring to work. I later realized that I could put dirty dishes back in the return bin since it was covered, and the breakfast crew never checked to see if any dirty dishes were in it. And the very few times they did check, they assumed dinner forgot to check before leaving. I always cleaned up the dishes I used making myself food out of fairness though. So now my job no longer requires me to do dishes, I get free food, and all I have to do is remember the date and click a button to do my actual job. What am I to do with all this time? I watched so many shows. I played online games on my laptop. I started learning Spanish. The GM did say he didn't care how I did my job, just do it, and so I did. I did eventually decide to move away for a much better job far away and had to give up the comfy life. I trained my replacement the way I was doing things, including the script, and did not teach him the manual way. Before I left, though, I decided to change the trial date to 1 week out. 2 days after my last day, the front desk manager texts me and tells me that the other auditor was just fired for making racist remarks to a guest and that guest recorded him, so he was fired once the GM got in. He asked if I could come back until they got someone else and said they'd pay me $15 an hour. Unfortunately, I was leaving in 2 days, so there was no way. I got a call from the GM at about 5 a.m. the day of the expiration, and he asked about this free trial thing and why wasn't the new guy trained how to do the audit properly, who was apparently working 7 days a week since no one else knew the audit except the new guy, and of course me. I reminded him that he told me he didn't care how I did my job, just do it, so I did exactly that. I could tell he wanted to yell, but he held back. He then demanded I come back and fix it or he'll have to take legal action. I told him I was already at my new place 2,000 miles away, but I would happily do it for airfare, a free room, free meals while I'm there, and $10,000. That was when he lost it, and I hung up. He texted me after saying he was contacting the lawyers and that I and prepare to face the consequences. That was 5 years ago, and I haven't heard anything from him since. I did eventually go back to that town a few months ago to see my mum and ran into the front desk manager from that place, who is a really nice guy. He told me the GM was caught fucking the head housekeeper in his office by his wife one day. Later divorced him. The 19-year-old girl working the front desk in the mornings later filed harassment charges against him, and he resigned after that. The AGM jumped ship after that. The GM was also a coach for a baseball team and hit a kid with a metal bat, breaking his arm and got shit rocked by the dad. Not sure what happened to him after that. The front desk manager now runs the place as GM, and he's made sure that he, the AGM, and the FDM are all trained to do the audit. The malicious compliance was flawless, effortlessly turning a terrible situation into a personal advantage. Automating work, enjoying free food, and leaving chaos behind for an ungrateful boss was pure genius. The GM's downfall was the perfect cherry on top. Absolute perfection. Let's start with a very interesting story from ancient_educator, _76. Only teach what's on the test? No problem. About 2 months ago, I worked for an absolute tyrant of an administrator. Dude was terrible. Terrible enough to warrant me writing in the apparent point of view of a 48-year-old teacher wishing he was Sigma. But I digress. Before working for this school, I was teaching 8th grade math, 4th grade math, or being an academic coach for the previous 18 or so years. I switched school primarily due to location. I found a school on the other side of the mountain I stare at nightly and figured it was a good match. Nope. This admin, we'll call him Poppin' Fresh, shut me down every step of the way. I entered the school middle of the school year with very rough kids, and my first day training the academic coach for the school and district trained us up on this math ELA anything you want gaming program called GimKit. I understand that GimKit isn't education in and of itself. It's simply a 5-minute tool to find out if kids know the content, and it engages the kids greatly. My first day with students, I saw their terrible behaviours. They ran 2 other teachers out of there evidently. So I decided it was going to take a little bit of grace to get them to listen to me. I showed them GimKit. They had popped open their Chromebooks for no more than 30 seconds when TA, terrible admin Poppin' Fresh, came in and shut it down instantly. He never assesses the situation. He just sees kids on hokey-looking activities as he literally pops in the classroom, bouncing around like he's on something. Anyway, this happened all the time. I would instruct for no more than 8 minutes tops and walk around and help them with concepts the best I could. I would be walking around, he would pop in and tell me to change something, like clockwork. Every program or strategy or center-based activity I try to use to get the 7th graders motivated gets shut down instantly, and he finally says out loud, "Teach only what's on the tests, nothing more." Bet. I took this as an opportunity to enter some MC with a side of, I can't believe I'm here. I start going by the book 100%. Anytime a student asks, why do we do it like this? When we are working on surface area and volume, I only say, that's not on the test. Anytime I naturally find an urge to find a connection to other standards, I stop myself. It's not on the test. Over a short amount of time, students are frustrated and sitting there yawning. It pains me greatly, so I decide to only apply my MC when good old Poppin' Fresh pops his way back into my classroom. He finally pops in with his boss's boss, and a couple of people I've never seen before. I instantly switch from my going deeper, thinking outside the box, activity-based learning, to exactly what he wants. Teaching only what's on the test. I instantly turn into Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and the kids instantly groan saying, "Mr. OP, I hate when you teach us like this." Comments from the students fly about the room. This is the worst part of my day. I hate math now, thanks. And many much more colourful, expletive-laden commentary. Frank Caliendo even popped in for a spell. Now here's a guy who doesn't know how to motivate students. Boom. Poppin' Fresh even doubled down on his usual banter, putting on a show for his crew of bosses. These kids seem highly unmotivated, OP. We need to meet about this if you can't get them engaged. I interjected, "You said to only teach what's on the test, so that's what I'm doing. Only what's on the test, right? Like if they wanted to know why this happens or that happens, or how to solve this different way. That's not on the test, right? You told me just to be up and be teaching and never have them on their Chromebooks, right?" I said this to him, in definite earshot of his accompanying party, mainly because I had a feeling these were the head honchos, the ones who signed off on spending all that money to make our school a true one-to-one school, a school where every student has a Chromebook. Not utilizing the Chromebooks is something I knew that was something Pop and Fresh believed in, but I had a feeling that the district would want the kids properly utilizing them. He answered back to me, I only stopped you from using the Chromebooks because the kids were all just playing games. The students interject then, it's a math game. The head honcho moved to Interjection City. Well, let's see what this math game is all about. I had the kids get their Chromebooks. They all excitedly logged on. I pulled up a surface area and volume GIMP and the kids were feverishly playing the game, using pencils and notebooks to solve the problems needed to be answered to gain ammunition in their game. It was active. It was fun for all. I paused the game when needed to show different ways to isolate the variable when solving surface area problems, especially of spheres and cones, etc. It was what education was supposed to be. Pop and Fresh ran out of pop, and by the end of the day, I received an email from the head honcho himself asking me about him and how things were going. I was honest with him. I told him about his assaults, threats of assaults, and hiding assaults. All things that I'm sure would be an interesting part of this tale, but they aren't related to the MC inherent here. It's also an ongoing investigation, even 2 months later as I'm teaching at a new school on the other side of the proverbial mountain. Pop and Fresh is under investigation for what he's been doing to me and other new teachers, to the school, and it's crawling all the way up the chain. This malicious compliance was masterclass. It was subtle, strategic, and utterly satisfying. By strictly following orders, OP exposed the admin's incompetence in front of his superiors. The timing, student reactions, and unexpected consequences made it a perfect. Very interesting story from Young Discord. You want me to shut up? Okay, your loss, I'll shut up. TL. DR. Toxic kinda GF kept telling me how I hurt her with the things I say, implying I shouldn't say them. I cut all contact with her and stopped talking to her. Okay, so first off, this is sort of malicious compliance. Although she never directly told me not to talk to her, she did constantly complain that the things I said hurt her. Out of context, this makes me look like a bad guy, but I promise I will explain everything. Also, this can also be sort of considered as a revenge story if you really want to push it. Okay, so backstory, I am in my mid-20s, and until recently, I had never been in a relationship. Girls didn't really notice me. I'm a guy in case anyone is wondering. And to be honest, I never really felt this urge to find someone right away. So this girl shows up in my life, let's call her E for obvious reasons. Now for a good few years, me and E were just casual distant friends. I met her when she was one of my friend's girlfriend. The relationship did not last long. Not, just to be clear, back then. And for a good while after their relationship ended, I was not interested in her in any way. I don't make advances on people who are in relationships, much less on my friends' partners. In fact, I don't even consider them as a potential love interest. Anyway, a few years pass, and somehow we end up catching up on FB. Somehow we manage to sort of hit it off. She is cute and seems interested in me, and I felt some sort of connection with her, so I figured maybe she might be the one. I was concerned that she was my friend's ex, and they did not end on good terms, so I didn't want to start anything with her officially until I knew for certain that she was going to be the one and that it was going to be serious. Boy, is I glad I was careful because I dodged a huge bullet. For like 3 months or so, we were in this weird state of being interested in each other, but for now, not committing to anything. During this time, she sucked me in, and by that, I mean sucked me in the way narcissistic, egocentric people do. And this girl's tactic was to play the victim. She would spend hours upon hours talking about this bad thing and that bad thing, and how her first BF, who she depicted as mistreating her in the same way she was mistreating me, traumatized her, how my friend traumatized her, etc. And this goes on for 3 months. I eventually start to notice a few things about her, and those are: 1. Whenever she would strike a conversation, the focus was on her. All of the time. Sometimes she pretended to ask me a question, but then brushed off the answer quickly and moved on to talking about her and her horrible things in life. 2. Naturally being interested in her, I wanted to know more about her, so I would ask stuff about her to get to know her better. But when I did, she put up a wall, stating that she is scared of being hurt again. So at some point, I just wouldn't ask those questions since she is unwilling to tell me anything deep or meaningful about her. I'm only complying with what she's telling me. If it bothers her, then I won't do it, right? 3. She would eventually complain to me and cry and make a scene because I didn't seem interested in her since I didn't ask questions about her to get to know her better. See the previous point for irony. And when I explained why, and that I saw that asking personal things bothered her, so I didn't want to hurt her or make her feel uneasy, she would just not have it and blame me for being insensitive, etc. Cue a 4-hour cry session where I try to calm her down. 4. Didn't ask anything about me, as if she weren't interested in me at all, but rather just wanted me to be someone who gave her constant attention. We are talking double-digit hours glued to the chat screen here, no joke. And if I mentioned it, I was the bad guy. Cue crying, playing the victim, etc. 5. Would ask me stuff, but then would berate me for giving my opinion or giving her advice on stuff. I guess she just wanted me to stay shut and just silently listen to her hours on end. 6. Whenever I tried helping her with her many issues by trying to lift her spirits or even just giving her advice, she would get defensive and then just say that I don't understand, completely dismissing the possibility that maybe the reason why I said the things I said was because I do understand and that she is the one who doesn't understand. She was very closed-minded whilst berating me for being too closed-minded, which was funny because of my next point. 7. She would constantly tell me what I am doing wrong. I don't think I ever heard a single compliment come from her. I know she has a lot of issues, but so do I. As a result of my low self-esteem, I generally tend to try and think, what can I do better? Maybe I should improve on something and I'm just not seeing it yet. And they have a point, etc. So whenever she criticized me for something I did, I would genuinely reflect on said thing and try to adapt or change it. And I changed a lot of things to cater to her personal needs. After all, if you are in a relationship, you need to adapt to the other person a bit, right? Right? Of course, back then, I had little experience in relationships, so I didn't really know the right way to do things. I would constantly try new things that I never did that she liked to do. After all, we can't do just the things I like, and we need to meet halfway. Except that we only did things she liked but didn't do any things I liked that she never did or liked. As you can see, it all seems very clearly toxic, though from up close back int, he day when it happened it was harder to see. Hence why I dodged the bullet. She cost me a lot of time and drama, but eventually things ended. Her, of course, being the one who ended whatever it was that we had, because she was too scared of being hurt again. Great tactic, sweetie. Shoot yourself in the foot because you are afraid someone might shoot it instead. I cried pretty hard that day, but I am a proactive person and I know that crying won't get you anywhere in life. If you want things to be better, you need to actually do something. As much as it will break your heart to do it, you need to do stuff. Now let's roll back to the last week of our thing that we had. Now she criticized me for not talking to people enough and not keeping in touch with them. Some with the attitude that I have, as I mentioned earlier, in one of the points. I began to think and came to the conclusion that she is right. So I made an effort to talk to a few people on FB, with whom I stopped talking for years. I randomly picked a few people, one of them being a girl called J. Now, E was really draining me emotionally during the last week. Trust me, hours and hours on end of being the shoulder to cry on for a few months will drain you faster than a coffee enema. And I really needed someone to help me out emotionally. Enter J. We hit it off. She seemed like an awesome person. Funny thing is, we didn't talk for 8 years, so she was basically a new person. She was funny, she was witty, the works. She was the highlight of my day whenever I talked to her. I realized that I really liked her. But of course, I was not going to make any advancements on her, because I was already in this semi-committed thing with E. And as much as E seemed to be toxic, I felt it wouldn't be right if I wouldn't at least try to make things work with E first as a last try, until I end things with her, and decide to move on. I am a loyal and fair person. I do not cheat or even look for someone else whilst with someone else. Alas, the heavens must have heard me because E decided to make things easy and end things herself. So now, let's resume me crying for about an hour. Didn't last long. The sadness was strong, but it ended rapidly because I felt this coming for a while now, and J showed up too near the end. So me and E decide to end up as friends. Oh, you thought the story ends here? Much mistaken. Which we do. Now, here is what happened over the following week after the breakup. I honestly don't know what to call it. I instantly hit it off with Jay and comes out. She was also interested in me. Comes out that she was in a very hard spot in her life, just when I happened to contact her, and unknowingly, I happened to really help her emotionally in a way no one else could. So I tell E the news. After all, we are friends, and I want her to know that her friend, me, is doing fine, and not to feel about ending things. She would often say things like, I feel like a bad guy now, to play the victim for doing something shitty. Seeing how at the time she seemed to act just fine. No dramas, etc. She seemed to have gotten over me pretty quickly and doing well. I thought we could just have a friendly chat, but nope. Enter the drama lord, bursts into tears, making me into some sort of monster by rubbing it in, that I found someone else while she is getting over it, etc. She then threw a tantrum and didn't talk to me for a while. This goes on for about a week. I try to talk to her like a friend and just be normal about stuff. I even helped be a wingman for her to get the attention of this guy she was into, which not long after telling me about him, revealed to me that she was already into him while we were still in our relationship. Frankly, that is okay. I understand. I was in the same situation, so I understand. If she wasn't hitting on him, it's okay. The heart wants what the heart wants. I won't criticize her for it. She played fair and everything was okay. Or at least it would be if she wouldn't have been giving me for the same thing. Hypocrisy comes to mind. Anyway, I let it slide, whatever. She is my friend. I want her to be happy, so I help her out. Cue a week of her freaking out over every little thing this guy does or doesn't do, and I am the one listening to it all. And soon, I notice that I am back to square one, where I am constantly being sucked into her little world of drama and insecurities. This time, however, I tell her to stop because this time, I have someone else. And if E were my partner, then I would be willing to spend so much time on her. But now, she is just my friend. And I have priorities. She can't be in the center of my life anymore. Cue her flipping out on me. Because of course she would flip out on me, screaming, accusing me of hurting her. Why do I do this, etc., and that she won't ever talk to me again. 2 days later, she talks to me as if nothing had happened and proceeds to tell me what I did wrong. At this point, I am close to my limit. I am a patient person when it comes to people, but enough is enough. So, as a friend, I try to give her some advice about the way she behaves, of course, in a friendly, most PC way possible. Of course, E takes it as an attack on her and proceeds to do her famous victim squeal, making me into Satan incarnate for daring, for criticizing her, because she is just too scared to address and deal with her issues and insecurities. Oh, hell no. That was the final straw. I tried everything, from listening to giving advice, even a bit of tough love on one occasion and nothing, and she was like a brick wall, expecting help but not willing to actually do anything. So I unleashed the truck of truth on her, and I did not. Hold. Back. I tell her how essentially that she can blame it on someone else, only so many times until she has to admit that maybe she is the reason why things mess up in her life. I told her how she was in, 3 relationships? Yeah, I know I counted us as one of them. And in each and every single one, she was the victim. Once. It happens. Twice. Okay, unusual coincidence, but by the 3rd time, she should be noticing that there is a pattern. And I basically told her that if she doesn't stop acting the way she does, she will never be in a relationship. That she will fail the relationship with the guy she currently likes, just like she failed the relationship with Guy A, my friend, and me. I then proceeded to tell her that I know what she will do now that she will cry, play the victim, throw a tantrum, and not talk to me for a few days, and that she can do that all she wants, But it won't change or fix anything until she actually starts addressing her own fears, issues, and insecurities. The last thing I wrote to her was that since I am such a bad guy and hurt her so much because I keep saying the wrong stuff, then I will just make things easy, do what she wants me to do, shut up, and just not talk to her. Told her not to bother replying to what I said because I am not going to read or reply to it since I know what it was going to be. Cue her doing exactly what I said she would do. When she realized that I didn't reply to her first comment, she of course sent another one, but again, I just didn't bother. Some of you may think, how is this malicious compliance exactly? Well, she kept saying that I say things I shouldn't say, etc., so I just complied and stopped talking to her altogether. In fact, I cut all contact with her. Why would this hurt her? Well, because she is the sort of person that needs to latch onto others to keep her drama going. If there is nobody left to blame or nobody to listen to her drama, she has to admit that she needs to do something about her life, and of course, she is too scared to do that, so she prefers to leech onto others who pat her on her head and say, there, it's all good. And now she has one less person to latch onto. As much as it might have hurt her, I did this in good faith. She needs to reach rock bottom until she finally realizes these things and gets her together. I only helped that happen. As for me, I got together with Jay, moved in with her, got a job, a house, and we have been together for almost a year now, and things are only getting better and better. Comes out that the person you think is the right one isn't always the one who is actually the right person for you. So for that, I am thankful to E for showing me the exact kind of person I was supposed to look for, who I surprisingly found right after her. And this is where the revenge part comes in. If she stalks my FB page or asks our common friends how I am doing very well. And funnily enough, at the time when me and E met, we, whether in very similar circumstances, same issues and insecurities, etc., so maybe if she sees me get my life together, she might realize that I was onto something. When I told her those things, because I did those things and it really helped me in life. E, I hope you got your shit together. I mean it. Procurement wants to play dumb? Sure thing. Indeed, OP's decision was the best. E expected endless emotional support while offering none, then demanded exclusivity while moving on herself. By cutting her off entirely and refusing to entertain her drama, I delivered the perfect, karma-filled consequence. Her own tactics turned against her. Very interesting story from aggravating_bike. _606. Do you want to put me on watch? I'll request you to watch me then. My first post here. First, I would like to thank you all for the amazing environment. I've been back to Reddit because of this place and reading up all the posts I can. I love that you all have a kink for justice as big as a kink for storytelling. My story begins working for a financial institution. Heaps of overworking and abuse. And we were contractors from a company in Brazil. We worked 12+ hours daily easily as we had to deploy stuff at midnight as it was a critical app. I was online all the time. I took all the heavy fire from the client who dealt directly with me. I had a manager who did nothing and despised me because the team loved me. She didn't know the teammates' names and things like this. We were the only team to have a planned on-duty schedule set up the month before, and everyone relied on us, client side and contractor company side. I was the only one the client had the cell phone, and they never complained. This manglewoman loved to give everyone's phones to the client so he could call devs non-stop, Saturdays, Sundays, moon or sun on the sky. I've put my foot down for the first time with this. The second time, she tried to send a 2-month girl intern to work with all males from another contractor company. You could imagine how workplace abuse would be dealt with. Alone. Now I know there's a lot of amazing people in the world, but I wouldn't put my hand in the fire for the tech community, sorry. This was the second time I've put my foot down. We had an altercation in a call with the client, because I directly said the intern productivity would plummet having to work with a strange team and under rules that are not our company's, and this could even lead to a lawsuit. She was pissed. We hung up. She calls me alone 0.2 seconds later and scolds me asking how do I think questioning her would be perceived. Now, I'm a scrum master. The only thing I do is conduct meetings and defuse bombs, so I thought she could use the neuron I freely gave her with my explanation. And I answered, hushing these serious decisions in front of the client said more about her incompetence than to discuss with me in front of him. I think I heard a vein pop on her head. She hung up. Now it gets good. Thanks for reading my introduction. 30 minutes pass, and I receive an email stating I was on HR watch for misconduct and insubordination. I was required to take one mentoring session weekly during 1 month, filling up an Excel through the week with everything I did and recounting on these sessions to see where I could improve. The thing is, she saw the dumpster fire the project was and just got accepted to switch project client, so she was going away next week or so. And my new manager would be a flower of a person who had nothing to do with this shit. I called HR and told them I would like to request her as my personal mentor, as she was the one who pointed so many improvement feedbacks to better my performance and was an example for me of what not to do, but I left this part out. They thought this was an amazing idea. The sessions had her and the HR worker responsible for the case, so she had to put a mentoring face. And lo and behold, I turn into Caspar Hauser during those sessions. I asked everything. I would fill the Excel to the brim with everything I did, including emails, chat convos, and even screen grabs from my personal phone the client used to message and requested to go through them so she could approve my company speech. I would link Excel files inside this Excel file so she had absolutely everything I did. One per row. Those sessions took 2 to 3 hours every Friday, scheduled at 8 a.m. by me, as she would be sure to complain when the team worked until 2 a.m., and I would let them come in late. She would have to rate everything in a drop-down cell, write the week's outcome, and come up with action points for next week. I couldn't help her with this, as I was there to learn. In the last meeting, I requested her manager to be on the meeting, a woman who filled my manager gaps when I needed most, and we had an amazing relationship. She agreed, as in her view, this was a successful mentoring case from her employer. I finished the meeting, asked for 2 minutes at the end, and forwarded my 2 weeks, here in Brazil it's 4, written by hand, with all the points that made me quit and receipts, including a part of the fight in front of the client I was able to record with my phone when I saw things going south. I still think about her, so this is the sad thing. But I now have an amazing job at a big tech and vowed to never be like her. The malicious compliance was flawless, strategic, exhausting for the manager, and poetic in its execution. By forcing her to engage in pointless, time-consuming mentorship, the OP exposed her incompetence while securing a better future. A masterclass in using bureaucracy against a terrible boss. Very interesting story from Mdlapla. I've been working on IT for around 25 to 26 years now. Different companies, but you see quite a bit of MC on the IT world. Back in 2005 to 6, I worked for a telephone company, a huge one, that had the typical Jira-like bug reporting tool for one of its most complicated and convoluted softwares. The software was so complex, so legacy, that even the development team in-house was afraid to do changes in it. Some updates in the past did backfire spectacularly more than once, so even the tiniest update to that software had to take weeks of analysis before taking place. In that dev team worked 3 of my friends from college. I worked on another one that had an easier life. One of my guys at that team was Bedu. To portrait Bedu accurately, imagine that guy that's always playing innocent pranks that you never know if he's for real when he's talking because he's always saying the most shocking things just for the LOLs, knows a little bit of magic, uses it to prank, and loves football, soccer as well. He used to be good at his job, but he's also a quite bit tired of it, procrastinating and generally not putting too much effort on it. The fact that he's part of that software dev team doesn't help. It's not a fast-paced environment and people get bored by the inaction. So, since he's bored, he plays pranks, like connecting a second wireless mouse controller to the PC of a colleague to randomly move the mouse and have him call tech support because his mouse misbehaves, but do absolutely nothing with the mouse when tech support comes. The guy being the target of the prank ended up calling tech support 4 times before being told what was going on. The team once a week also books a windowless meeting room for an hour, so 3 of them can take a nap while the 4th one guards against someone finding out. Who's the guard rotates each week. The requests for update Badu gets are almost always something in this style. This report indicates that X value is 25, when it should be 27, please fix. Each request typically comes from a different area, but each area sends a couple of requests probably once a month. But Baidu knows that the algorithm doing that calculation is extremely complex. Reports are baked on a monthly basis on batch processes that can take hours. Testing this is extremely painful also, so he updates the end value on the report. Where it was 25, now is 27, easy peasy, see you next month. He gets probably like 10 to 15 of these requests per day. Baidu updates the bug tool ticket stating, on the comment field, something like end value verified and corrected, and moves on. New boss comes to that dev team from another team on the company. He's well known around the company as being quite dense. He instantly clashes with the team. He thinks quantity equals quality and loves to look into numbers. He comes from the database world, so he's constantly using queries to gather information. He also thinks that each ticket solved is because the underlying condition is being solved. He knows nothing about the complexity of the system. He just thinks that the team is really good at identifying causes and solving them fast. Glorified pencil pusher. He gathers the team and says that he did a query and found out that the comments being put into the bug tool are really short, like less than 50 characters long, and that is not enough to explain what has been done to solve the incident. The whole team explains that what's being put into the comment field is more than enough. He says that comments should at least have 1,000 characters. It's the minimum he'll accept. He says that having comments with less than 1,000 characters will impact his valuation of the work being done. Baidu, being the devious character he is, decides to complain. Especially since he knows that Boss would never open the bug tool, he loves his databases. First ticket comes in, this value is this, should be that. He updates value, writes the same comment he always does, end value verified and corrected. And then, taking advantage on the fact that the comment field has format capabilities, WYSIWYG type of editor, copies and pastes the chronicle from the latest football match into the field, changes the color to white and the font size to 1 so it can't be seen against the background on the tool, and closes the ticket. If you're the original ticket poster, that comment field is read only, so unless someone selects and highlights the comment, they won't know that something else is there. Next ticket comes, does the same, but writes a rant about some stupid thing. Then on the next ticket, he just keeps pushing random keys and the spacebar until the character counter reaches 1,000. He gets bored of doing this, so he becomes more ingenious and inventive by the ticket. Somewhere hidden in that bug tool comment system, a complete original Baidu novel separated in small chapters ends up being written that no one knows about, outside of us few that have lunch with Baidu and the team. Boss comes a month after and says to Baidu, "I've noticed that the size of your comments has gone up last month. You're averaging well over 1,000 characters per ticket. Keep it up." Baidu, plus all my other friends and myself, left the company to greener pastures a year later. I still talk daily with Baidu and people from that team. TLDR. New boss says that bug tool comments should be at least 1,000 characters. When 50 are more than enough, engineer starts writing hidden messages to comply with that, while making it interesting for himself. Baidu's malicious compliance was flawless, effortlessly meeting absurd demands while making a joke out of the boss's ignorance. Hiding entire essays in plain sight, he turned a tedious rule into an inside joke. Brilliant, petty, and hilariously effective. The next story from party_shape, 557... My boss hired 2 interns to replace me and asked me to train them after they were planning to fire me. I'm going to start out by saying that English is not my first language, and I wasn't sure that this story belongs here, as this is my first time posting. I used to work in media intelligence, which is a really niche market in the country that I am from. I started as an assistant and learnt everything from scratch. As I switched from the hospitality industry, pretty big step I know, I was eager to learn and was really interested in what they do as I was trying to get into media back then. First of all, as I learnt everything from scratch, I got really good at what I do after just 6 months working there. I was in a 3-person team, and I had one of the best bosses and a rally good colleague, which were veterans in the industry. Both of them helped me a lot to get me where I am then. They left the company after just a year there, as upper management was just plain hot garbage. The company had 4 changes in direction within a year, and it was stressing my team out. They did ask me to leave with them, but with me being young and naive trying to prove myself, I declined. The story, after my boss and colleague left, it was just me and my team, and I was in charge of a few markets. I was asked to be on call for technical support and was not offered anything in return. At the time, I was pissed, but also trying to prove myself, I obliged. I got really stressed out from working 13 hours a day for a few months at that point, and I kept asking my manager to hire more people, as I can't be working like this, and it's stressing me out. My manager went on and on saying they don't have the budget for it, so I just forgot about it, drowning myself in work. One day, the CEO of the company came, and we had dinner, as he was growing close to me since I was the only one person left who actually know the in and out of the old and new system that the company used. Keep in mind, this CEO is a cheapskate and will try all and every way to suck you dry. He asked me what I wanted to change in the company during dinner, so I started off with asking for 2 new hires for my team, where he gave me the same answer as my manager, so I asked him for a promotion and a raise, which was also declined, saying, "You don't have the necessary experience yet." I was pissed. As a normal person would expect, after working 13-hour days for months, you would need rest. I had almost 3 weeks of PTO saved, and I needed the rest. The manager threatened to fire me if I took any PTO, as no one was able to do what I did. I took the PTO anyways. I got well rested, and all was good until I came back. There were 2 new faces, and I was pretty confused, so I asked my manager who were they, and she told me they were my replacements. She told me my notice was 2 months, and I had to train them before I leave. She couldn't do anything, as I was the only one in the company who knew how to run the legacy and the new systems, so realistically, she couldn't say that I was not training them properly, as she didn't know how things work. Here is the part where the malicious compliance happens, since the manager did not know how things work. She told me to train the interns on the legacy systems to know better on how the company was built up, and I did just that. She told me strictly to just train the interns on the legacy, and she will be dealing with the rest. Sure, I'll do just that. It was until my last week when the shit really hit the fan. My manager found out that I have been only giving training on the legacy system, and I didn't give them my notes with tips on how to run the system that needed to be used for daily operations. My manager called in the CEO and the managing director to hold a meeting with me asking me why I hadn't trained my replacements properly. I just told them I did what my manager told me to, which the manager denied, until I forwarded the CEO and MD the email that my manager has sent me, which the call promptly ending. After I left the company, I was patiently waiting for the call that was bound to come. It was my manager. She demanded me to get back to work and said that the firing was just prank blah. I told them, pay me triple my wage and I'll consider it. They called me crazy and ended the call. It's been 2 months since that call, and based on a good friend from another department, my old manager is neck deep in this shit show. TLDR, fire me from taking PTO, get fucked. Edit, thank you for the kind and nice comments. And to those who think I'm making this up, you're entitled to have your opinion, but fuck you. Edit 2. So I've gotten into contact with my ex-colleagues. My ex-manager is now exploring greener pastures, and the 2 interns quit after a bit. The company had to scrap the new system where they spent a lot developing, and then had to buy out another company specializing in system development and maintenance, which costed them $12 million. Guess who'd be able to run their systems cheaper? Wink, wink. The malicious compliance and revenge were perfect and executed flawlessly. By strictly following orders, OP ensured the company's downfall without breaking a single rule. The CEO's greed and the manager's incompetence led to their own ruin. A masterclass in workplace revenge. The next story from Eatonars. Don't use anything except Windows? Sure, have it your way. Before I start, let me just point out that this is not a Windows versus topic. Some 6 years ago, I worked in a small IT services shop that had an extremely liberal BYOD policy. You could use anything you wanted as long as it got the job done and does not introduce any problems into the client's network or infrastructure. Sounds fair enough. As I have been using Linux for almost 2 decades, and most of my job is centered sending emails or traveling to the client's offices to diagnose any problems, I figured a Linux machine would not compromise my workflow much. Most of those devices are network appliances which are managed either by command line or a web-based GUI. And if the device in question was a standard server running Windows, I could RDP into it using xFreeRDP. Nothing that specifically required Windows. Now mind you, desktop Linux has its own fair share of shits and problems that Windows users will never ever encounter, even by today's, yes, in 2021, standards. Teething and long-standing problems like laptops failing to resume after suspend, mysterious hardware issues caused by the kernel drivers, the Linux sound system and graphics system failing to properly switch over after the laptop has been connected to an external display or projector, X suddenly throwing a fit and deciding it doesn't want to start up the desktop GUI, and on and on. It's one thing when these problems happen at home, but it's a totally different level of pissed off and frustration while they happen while out at work. Naturally, my clients didn't appreciate me taking longer than usual to address their issues when Linux decides to act up. But since I generally manage to, eventually, resolve their problems, they tend to close one eye as a professional courtesy. Besides, it also meant that they could seek me out for free advice on certain issues that involved their Linux servers, in exchange for their silence on my laptop's mishaps. My manager thought differently though. To him, it is an embarrassment for a support staff's laptop to be running into all kinds of problems while at a client's premises. Finally, after one too many mishaps, he chewed me out big time. Manager. After a presentation where my laptop decided to pull a Murphy and started flashing a nice mess of colors and lines over the projector in the middle of the session, most Xorg graphics drivers were and are still a complete joke today. How many times has this been? Me? I'm sorry, sir. Manager. Don't give me that. From now on, you will use only Windows in your laptop. Do I make myself clear on this? Now, in all fairness, I was already considering a switch to Windows 8. Windows 10 was not released yet for my work laptop because of all the little paper cuts that I had to put up with on Linux. Habit, and because I'm used to it, has no influence on the matter when work is concerned. But at the same time, I was petty enough that I felt the urge to put up some form of token resistance, if only just even the score, so to speak. Regardless, I took out the hard disk containing Linux from my laptop, installed a new hard disk in its place, and performed a clean installation of Windows 8. And life was so much better. Still, I kept the old hard disk in a portable case in my bag at all times with a set of screwdrivers, should there ever be any need for it. One fine day, I followed my manager to another client's site to inspect some networking issues. The client was running a network test appliance in their lab network. This tester generates garbage but proper network traffic to a defined destination IP address, and they were wondering why the destination was only receiving less than 1% of the garbage they were expecting to see. Now, I am way out of my league here. I have no formal training or certifications in networking outside of my own experiences and self-study, and informed the client as such, but they weren't bothered. They assured me that they just wanted to exhaust all possibilities as to why the destination node wasn't getting the garbage they were supposed to see, and it would be a learning experience for all the people involved, including themselves. With that assurance in mind, I had them lead me to the destination node, which was a workstation running on Windows 7 with Wireshark to perform a packet capture of all incoming traffic. First alarm bell starts going off. Before I could even say anything, My manager cut in and said that it's probably because they were using Windows 7 for the destination node, and that my laptop with Windows 8 may produce better results. I swear, I had to fight the urge to roll my eyes on hearing this. And when I tried to explain to him how unlikely a newer version of Windows would even solve anything, he brushed it off, saying that we should try everything. Well, if he wants to make a fool of himself, I'm game. Cue the MC. For the 2 hours, he kept giving me all manner of instructions and suggestions which naturally did not work. Changing the MTU size, changing the NIC settings, applying certain Windows updates, etc., and I had no desire to oppose him in making a fool of himself. Finally, when he was about to call it quits as the client's working hours were about to end, I asked the client if they could tell me a little more about the traffic that was being generated by the network tester. Oh, all kinds of traffic. GRE, MPLS, VLAN, and stacked VLANs, fiber channel, a lot of types actually. Second alarm bell starts going off. For those who are not familiar, hardware network drivers in Windows are usually end-user drivers supplied by the vendors of the NIC and submitted to Microsoft for integration purely as a convenience. That is, they are drivers that are designed to be used for nothing more than standard TCP/IP and UDP/IP communication over Ethernet. Any frame or packet that is not recognized by the driver gets dropped silently. No warning, no alert. Just dropped. Such drivers are perfect for normal networking, but are almost completely useless for diagnosing enterprise network issues where VLANs, tunnels, and other protocols are commonplace. On the other hand, a NIC driver in Linux usually supports a much more comprehensive network stack and thus has a drastically higher chance in seeing and recording different kinds of network traffic than Windows during a packet capture. So I was fairly certain at this point that there was nothing wrong with their network tester or their lab network at all. It was just the NIC driver in Windows doing exactly what it was supposed to do: drop any traffic it does not recognize, and asked the client if they could kindly stay back for just about 30 minutes after their working hours for me to try one last option. They agreed, so I took the old Linux hard disk out from my bag and proceeded to do a hard disk swap on my laptop. In the meantime, my manager was grumbling non-stop about me wasting everybody's time and being stubborn and refusing to use Windows as instructed. With the old Linux hard disk installed, I booted up into my old installation, connected the laptop to the network tester, and started T-Shark. Almost immediately, everyone could see my laptop's gigabit port being flooded with traffic, and the packet count was easily more than 30 times what was observed in Windows. Finally, for the coup de grace, I cut the capture and opened the PCA PNG file in Wireshark, which proudly displayed traffic from all the various network protocols previously mentioned. Of course, I also informed the client that there was nothing wrong with their workstation, with Windows, or with the network tester. They just needed to find a modified or debug driver that could recognize such traffic, or otherwise set up a temporary Linux node for their packet capture requirements. On the other hand, my manager was rather poked at me for what he claims was wasting 2 hours of everybody's time, when I already knew what the problem was right from the start, but refused to share it with the others until now. So it was extremely gratifying when the client stepped in and put my manager in his place by pointing out that 1, he never bothered to ask about the traffic type 2. He assumed that it was a Windows configuration issue, and 3, he never thought to ask me what I thought might be the cause. My manager never spoke to me again after that incident, outside of a half-hearted attempt to retain me when I finally resigned a year later. Update 1. To make it clear, I am not blaming my manager in any way when he made me use Windows, because I would have already done so myself after having to deal with all the random issues encountered while on the job. I just did not take very kindly to the "you will use only Windows" portion of his orders. The malicious compliance was perfectly executed. Despite being forced to use Windows, OP subtly let my manager lead himself into making flawed decisions. The best part was when OP provided the solution, leaving his manager embarrassed and the client impressed. Very interesting story from Sunday in Pixels. To work nightmare. After car accident. Here's a flip side. Malicious compliance carried out by my manager against myself. Many years ago, I worked at a care home for individuals who needed help learning how to transition into living independently. I loved my job. I loved the people I cared for. It was tough though, as we were always short-handed. Staff had a high turnover rate because the pay wasn't great. We were consistently working double shifts and getting called in to work on our nights off. I was generally open to it as I had no kids at the time, and half my shift was literally hanging out with some of the coolest clients I ever met. Cooking dinner with them, watching movies, and after they went to bed and everything was cleaned up, I was allowed to do homework or art or really whatever I wanted within reason. The clients here really liked me and would look forward to when I was coming on shift. They would often come out to the driveway area to greet me when I got in. One day, the manager and several clients were in the driveway waiting for me to arrive. Just as my husband was about to pull into the driveway, residential road speed limit 25, we were hit from behind. The driver was going near 70 miles per hour and reached down to get his cell phone and hit us as we were pulling into the driveway. The way he hit us, and with how fast he was going, our car did a full 360-degree spin in the driveway, and everything that was in our trunk went flying all over. The manager and the clients all saw what happened, and we were very lucky that day that they were further back in the drive and didn't get hit. The manager called an ambulance for us. My husband's knee went into the dash, and I was in complete shock. Felt like the world slowed down to frame-by-frame slow motion. The ambulance took us both to the hospital. Our car had to be towed away. At the hospital, we were cared for, and I was given an order to stay on bed rest for a few days and see my family physician as soon as possible. Ultimately, I was okay. Major whiplash and body aches, headaches, etc. from the shock and the force of the vehicles clashing, but nothing severe. My husband wasn't as lucky, but he was okay and just had to use crutches for a while. His knee healed. After the few days of rest, I was still sore but ready to return to work and just move forward. I arrived at work for my shift, and when I entered the house, my manager, the one that saw the crash and called the ambulance, was in the dining area sitting at the table with paperwork in front of her. She said, "Have a seat so we can go over this paperwork." I say down, and she asked for my doctor's note that put me on bed rest for the few days. Well, I didn't have one. I hadn't considered it in my state of shock at the time to ask for one. She had seen firsthand the accident and saw me being taken away in an ambulance. So surely there wasn't a question of why I had to call in for those shifts? Wrong. Company policy. If you miss 3 shifts, you must show documentation from a doctor that you were instructed to take those days off work, or you cannot return to work. Okay, no problem. Sorry, I didn't realize it was needed. I'll run up to the hospital and get that right away. So I head up to the hospital and let them know I had been seen there a few days ago after a car wreck, and I needed a note that stated I was seen, and what the doctor recommended that I take a few days of bed rest. So the reception, who is currently dealing with a triage of patients waiting to be seen, eye rolls and looks up the file. After reading it, she writes a note to my work stating that I was been a wreck and had been seen and was excused from work for 3 days. I promptly return to work and hand her the note and let her know they pulled the file and got it taken care of. I expected she would let me fill out the paperwork and go on with my shift. Nope. She says, "The note has to be written by a doctor, not reception." "Oh, okay," I say. "I'll run back up and let them know what we need." I head back to the hospital. I let the reception know I was sorry to interrupt again, but I needed a note that was written by a doctor. My boss can't accept it from reception. She says, "Well, I'm a nurse, but okay, I'll see if I can get this signed by a doctor." Quite a while later, she was able to get it signed by a doctor who would much rather be spending their time caring for people who ran over their foot with a lawnmower. I thank her and head back to work with the note. Once again, expecting to move on and get back to work. Nope. She says, "So, is this the doctor that you saw the night of the accident?" "Well, no, of course not. This is an ER, and most of the doctors at this hospital work for several different ER around the valley, and they are rarely aliveness at the same hospital in a given week more than once or twice. This is a known fact in our area. But they pulled the file and confirmed the information that I was seen and excused from work, and was asked to see my family physician as soon as I could. Sorry, but I must have a note from the doctor that saw you in the ER the night of the accident, not some random doctor. And because you can't seem to follow policy, you are now suspended for 3 days. I expect you to have a note from the doctor who saw you before you return after your suspension. I am beside myself. Why? In God's name, am I being forced to do this and suspended when she saw the wreck and called the ambulance herself? I am so confused at this point. I was an excellent employee, almost a college graduate with near-perfect marks, availability beyond the scope of my own schedule weekly, last-minute double shifter for sake of the company and the clients without even a whine, suffering the effects of malicious compliance far beyond my comprehension. So, what shall I do? I went back to that hospital on the off chance the doctor would be there. He was not there, and he wouldn't be for weeks. I spent the next day tracking down this doctor, and in the end, I prevailed. I got my note from the doctor that saw me in ER on the night of the wreck. I went into work early the next morning before the manager would arrive. I placed the note on her desk front and center, with my keys and another note stating my gratefulness for the opportunity I had to work with these amazing clients. But that unfortunately, I could no longer afford the time to work there as I was in a crunch with completing my education. Wished her well, and good luck. I continued to visit the clients often as a friend instead of a caregiver, and I'll never forget the awesome times we had hanging out, BSing about the world with no doctor's note required to do so. That malicious compliance dished out to me resulted in an ample amount of double shifts for the old manager, though. The manager's malicious compliance was petty and cruel, enforcing policy despite witnessing the accident firsthand. However, it backfired brilliantly, forcing her into extra shifts while the employee walked away with dignity. A perfect, unintended revenge through her own rigid rule-following.